Welcome back, everybody. Today we're doing a deep dive into learning to learn, which is something I'm really excited about because it's not just about, taking in a bunch of facts. It's really about understanding how we learn and how to become better learners.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's really like developing a metacognitive skill set.
Metacognitive. Now, there's a big word.
It is, but it's really just learning about learning.
I like that.
And it's something that anyone who wants to learn anything more effectively can benefit from.
And in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information,
Yeah.
I feel like that's more valuable than ever.
It really is.
So for this deep dive, we have a handbook for facilitators and a research article about learning to learn.
Right.
And, what I'm really curious about is how do we take all of that and actually, put it into practice in our daily lives?
That's a great question. And one of the things that I found really interesting from the research is the idea of learning styles,
Yeah.
like visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
Oh, yeah. I've taken so many quizzes telling me I'm a visual learner.
Right, exactly. And it turns out that may not be as cut and dry as we once thought.
Really? So all this time I thought I needed to be, looking at diagrams and mind maps to learn best.
It might help, but the research suggests that learning actually involves multiple senses working together. And
Yeah.
so if we limit ourselves to just one style, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice.
So it's more complex than just, I'm a visual learner or I'm an auditory learner.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than that.
So if learning styles aren't really the answer, then where do we even begin?
Well, I think a really good place to start is with self-awareness. The handbook actually mentions a really great quote from a participant who said, "I learn best when I'm interested."
Makes total sense. When you're fascinated by something, you just soak it up like a sponge.
Exactly. And that intrinsic motivation is key. And so figuring out what your passions and interests are can really fuel your learning.
I know for me, I could never remember dates in history class,
Mm-hmm.
but I would devour books about ancient civilizations.
Mhm.
I just found the story so captivating.
Exactly. And that's the power of finding something that really grabs you.
So how do we sort of tap into that more intentionally?
Well, the handbook suggests something called reflective writing.
Okay.
And one way to do this is by keeping a learning journal.
Interesting.
So as you're learning something new, you just jot down your thoughts, your insights, any questions that come up.
So like after reading an article, I might summarize the key points or connect it to something I already know.
Exactly. It's about making the learning more active and meaningful.
I like that because it helps you really digest the information and make it stick.
Right. And it also helps you to identify any gaps in your understanding or areas where you might need to explore further.
So it's not just about passively absorbing information, it's about engaging with it critically.
Exactly.
Now, the handbook also mentions the value of learning from others. And there's this really interesting anecdote about a participant who visualized the map of India on their body as a memory strategy.
Oh, wow.
It really highlights how creative and diverse learning can be when we share our techniques with each other.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of social learning, whether it's through discussions, study groups, online communities,
Right.
interacting with other people exposes us to different perspectives, different approaches, which can really enrich our understanding.
It's like that saying, two heads are better than one.
Exactly. And you never know where that next aha moment is going to come from.
It reminds me of those brainstorming sessions where one person's idea sparks a whole chain reaction of new insights.
Exactly. And that's why collaboration and knowledge sharing are so crucial for effective learning.
So we've talked about self-awareness, we've talked about reflective writing and learning from others. What else is there?
Well, the next important aspect highlighted in the handbook is planning, but with a good dose of flexibility.
Okay, now planning and flexibility, those seem kind of like opposite ideas when it comes to learning. Isn't learning about, being open to discovery and those unexpected aha moments?
You're right, it can seem counterintuitive. And the handbook actually addresses this with a pretty funny story about a training where participants felt pressured to prove they learned something after only 20 minutes.
Oh, I've totally been there. It's like you're expected to instantly absorb everything and then regurgitate it on demand.
Exactly, and that's not how deep learning works. So the handbook emphasizes that planning in this context is more about creating a roadmap than a rigid itinerary.
So more like a general guide, not a strict set of rules.
Exactly. And they introduce the concept of a personal development and learning plan, or PDLP for short, but they caution against sticking to it too rigidly.
Gotcha. So it's more like a compass guiding our overall direction, allowing for detours and discoveries along the way.
Exactly. The PDLP is a tool for self-reflection, setting goals, and outlining potential pathways. But life, just like learning, rarely follows a perfectly straight line.
So we need to be prepared to adapt and adjust as we go.
Absolutely unexpected challenges, new interests, even just shifts in motivation can require us to rethink our plans.
And being open to those changes is key to staying motivated and avoiding that feeling of getting stuck.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you're learning something brand new or, trying to master a complex skill.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important point. How do we know if we're actually on the right track or if we need to, make some adjustments?
Right. Like, how do we course correct if we're veering off in the wrong direction?
Well, the handbook suggests incorporating regular check-ins into your PDLP. So basically taking some time to review your progress, reflect on what's working and what's not, and, identify any areas where you might need to tweak your approach.
So it's not just about setting a goal and then blindly charging ahead. It's about being aware of how things are going and being willing to adjust as needed.
Exactly. And this is where feedback comes in.
Okay, so both self-assessment and feedback from others.
Exactly. You can ask yourself questions like, am I still engaged with this material? Am I making progress toward my goals? And then you can also seek input from peers, mentors, instructors, anyone who can offer a fresh perspective.
Because sometimes I think we're just too close to our own learning process to see the big picture.
Right, and a different set of eyes can help us spot blind spots or uncover new possibilities.
And this actually ties into another interesting point that the handbook brings up, which is the evolving role of educators in a learning-to-learn environment.
Right, so instead of being the sole source of knowledge, the educator becomes more of a facilitator, a guide on the side.
So less sage on the stage, more guide on the side.
Exactly, and this means creating learner-centered environments where students are actively engaged in the learning process.
So moving away from those passive lectures and rote memorization that so many of us grew up with.
Exactly, it's about encouraging more interactive, collaborative, and inquiry-based learning.
Which sounds amazing, but it also seems like it requires a lot of trust in the student's abilities to learn independently.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important for facilitators to foster a sense of ownership and agency among their learners. Set clear expectations, provide guidance, but also allow space for experimentation and even, occasional missteps.
Speaking of missteps, how does a learning-to-learn approach deal with the fear of failure, which I think holds a lot of people back from trying new things?
That's a really important point, and the handbook emphasizes the importance of cultivating a growth mindset, which means seeing mistakes as opportunities for learning and improvement rather than, setbacks or failures.
I love that because it takes the pressure off perfection and allows us to be more open to taking risks.
Exactly, and facilitators can play a big role in modeling this attitude and creating a safe space for students to experiment and learn from their mistakes.
It's like that saying, fail forward. It's about reframing failure as a stepping stone on the path to success.
Right, and one way to do that in a learning environment is by focusing feedback on effort and strategies rather than just outcomes.
So instead of just saying, you got this wrong, you might say, okay, here's what you did well, and here's some things you could try differently next time.
Exactly. It's about helping learners develop those metacognitive skills that we talked about earlier.
So they can monitor their own learning, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and, come up with strategies for overcoming challenges.
Exactly.
This emphasis on process over product reminds me of another tool that the handbook mentions, the learning river.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? It does sound kind of poetic, like a metaphor for the whole learning process.
Right. It's a really powerful visualization tool, and the idea is to imagine a river representing your learning journey.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
And it starts as a small stream, maybe with, your earliest memories of learning to read or ride a bike.
Oh, I love that. It's like those first little trickles of knowledge.
Exactly. And as you go through life, that stream grows wider and deeper. You encounter different landscapes, challenges, moments of discovery.
It's like a journey with all its twists and turns.
And the Learning River exercise encourages you to actually map out those experiences.
Interesting. So like marking those significant milestones, the obstacles you overcame, the knowledge and skills you gained along the way.
Exactly. It's like creating a personal learning map, charting the course of your development.
I like that because it helps you see those patterns,
Yeah.
When were you most engaged? What kind of learning environments worked best for you?
Right, and those insights can be really valuable for future learning. If you know what works for you, you can be more intentional about seeking out those opportunities.
So it's about understanding your strengths and weaknesses and tailoring your approach accordingly.
Exactly. And it also helps you to appreciate the interconnectedness of your learning experiences. All those seemingly separate tributaries eventually flow together to create this broader, deeper river of understanding.
So it's not just about the individual skills and facts, it's about how they all connect to form a bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of lifelong learning. It's a continuous process of growth and evolution.
Speaking of interconnectedness, the handbook also mentions something called the learning interview.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
Can you tell me more about that?
So the learning interview is basically a structured conversation between two people where they take turns interviewing each other about their learning experiences.
Okay.
It's a chance to really tap into that collective wisdom, gain new perspectives, discover hidden strengths and challenges.
It's like learning from each other's stories.
Exactly. And the handbook provides a set of guiding questions to help spark the conversation.
Such as?
Things like, what are some of your most memorable learning experiences? What are your preferred learning styles? What are your goals for the future?
So it's a way to reflect on your own learning journey while also gaining insights from someone else's.
Exactly. And it often leads to those aha moments, those sudden realizations about yourself and how you learn best.
And I imagine it also creates a sense of connection and shared purpose.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we're not alone in this journey of learning to learn. We all have something to offer.
This has been a fantastic deep dive, really insightful and practical. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for approaching learning more effectively.
That's great to hear.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just say embrace the journey. Learning to learn is an ongoing process of self-discovery, experimentation, and reflection.
Don't be afraid to try new things. Seek feedback and adjust your course as you go.
Exactly.
But remember, you don't have to do it alone. Connect with others, share your experiences, and learn from each other's journeys.
Absolutely.
Keep those minds curious and happy, learning, everyone.